Hello and welcome to Trails Worth Hiking, the show that brings you some of the most interesting backpacking and trekking routes in the world. I'm your host, Jeremy Pendry. In the first part of the show, we bring you the story and history of a trail. Then we tell you what it's like to hike the trail and how you can do it. On this episode, we revisit an alpine wonderland rising out of the desert. Back in episode 7, I interviewed Ryan Cornia, Road Trip Ryan, about his adventure on the Ruby Crest Trail in the Ruby Mountains of Nevada. Ryan and his wife had such a fantastic experience on the trail that they named their daughter Ruby after the area. In 2018, I had tried to do that hike, but due to bad weather and forest fires, I wasn't able to do it. But this past summer in 2021, I finally did the hike along with my son Justin and my hiking buddy Tony Wong. Now that I've hiked the trail, on this episode of Trails Worth Hiking, we revisit the Ruby Mountains and go a little deeper on the Ruby Crest Trail in Nevada. Welcome to the show, everyone. This is our first update episode. So what is an update episode? Well, there are two kinds of trails we cover on this show. Trails I've hiked and trails I want to hike. For that second category, once I've published an episode about a trail, someday I might actually hike the trail. And when I do, then I can give you my perspective on the trail and the perspective of the people I've hiked with. So in episode 7, we covered the Ruby Crest Trail. If you haven't listened to it, give it a try. It's a good episode, if I do say so myself. I think you'll like it. And this episode will be even more enjoyable if you've listened to episode 7. I don't plan to repeat all the history of the area and the trail that I covered in episode 7. That's all there in that episode. This episode will be about my experience and the experience of my friend Tony Wong and my son Justin on this fantastic trail. So let's go back to 2018. In 2018, as I mentioned in the intro, I tried to hike the Ruby Crest Trail. As you will have heard in episode 7, I drove all the way out to northeastern Nevada back in 2018, but then two things happened. First, it snowed. I was going to hike the route solo, but that didn't seem like a good idea with a trail that would have been under snow. So instead, I decided to hike just one end of the trail and spend a night or two by some nice lakes a few miles in. But the morning that I arrived at the trailhead at the Lamoille Canyon end of the Ruby Crest Trail back in 2018, smoke was pouring out of the canyon. A wildfire was burning in the canyon and the trailhead was closed. I still went camping, though car camping rather than backpacking, in another part of the Ruby Mountains. And then my father and my stepbrother drove out and we camped together and went fishing in the Ruby Valley at Ruby Lake. So all was not lost, and in fact, I had a great time, and I guess then a lot was gained. But in summer 2021, I tried again. This time with Tony and Justin, rather than solo. And to be honest, the wildfires almost got me again. But this time, there weren't any wildfires in the Rubies, but there were massive wildfires in the Sierra Nevada and had sent a lot of smoke that really, depending on the direction of the wind, was also blanketing the Ruby Mountains and frankly, all of the western United States and even beyond. But we did the hike, and it worked out fine. So here's a little recap about the Ruby Mountains and the trail. Again, you'll find a lot more information in episode 7. This is just a little bit of a orientation on the region. The Ruby Mountains are a 90-mile mountain range. There are 10 peaks that rise above 10,000 feet, or 3,000 meters. And there are more than 24 alpine lakes. Lamoille Canyon, at the north end of the trail, is considered the Yosemite Valley of Nevada. It's a beautiful, huge U-shaped, glacially carved canyon. The trail is about 40 miles, which I'm going to guess is maybe 65 kilometers or so. And the itinerary that we hiked is a 4-day itinerary. And we hiked it south to north, the same as Ryan Cornia had hiked it and we discussed in episode 7. So a little bit on logistics. The night before the hike, you need to find somewhere to stay because wherever you're coming from, it's a long drive and you're not going to start hiking probably the day you arrive. So there are several options. One is to stay in Elko, Nevada, which is the nearest city, and there's plenty of accommodations there. The other option is to go camping. There's a reservoir near Elko, which my father and stepbrother and I actually camped at, but I don't recommend it. It's exposed and not terribly interesting, but it'll do in a pinch. So the two better options are camping either in Lamoille Canyon at Thompson Canyon Campground or camping near the southern end of the trail in the Ruby Valley at South Ruby Lake Campground. The other thing you have to figure out is your shuttle. Unless you have 2 cars, which most people aren't going to have, you need to figure out which end to put your car at and which end to get a shuttle. And so the choice about where you stay the night before will obviously impact that. Ryan, in his trip, after camping at Thompson Canyon Campground, had left his car at the trailhead in Lamoille Canyon so that he would have it when he finished the trail. And then he took a shuttle back to Harrison Pass, which is the southern entrance to the trail. For a number of reasons, we decided to do it differently. First, there weren't any reservations available for a spot in Thompson Canyon Campground. So we decided to camp closer to Harrison Pass, where the south trailhead is. We camped in South Ruby Lake Campground, which is down below the Ruby Mountains in the Ruby Valley next to Ruby Lake National Preserve. This required us to park at the southern trailhead and leave our car there throughout the hike. And so what we were going to do is park near Harrison Pass or at Harrison Pass and have a shuttle ready at the end to drive us back to Harrison Pass. This meant planning for a bit more time on the back end to take a shuttle and retrieve the car. But we had planned to stay with some friends near Reno on the way home, so this was not a problem for us to fit that into our schedule. One other thing you can find if you go back and listen to episode 7 is the interview I did with my father about the Ruby Valley and the Ruby Lake area, which is a beautiful marsh oasis in the desert that is fed by groundwater from the Ruby Mountains. In addition to Thompson Canyon Campground not having available space, I really did want to show Tony and Justin the Ruby Valley and Ruby Lake because I thought it was such a cool thing to see. There's bird life everywhere, and it's just a beautiful marsh oasis, as I said. And so when we arrived and got to the campground and set up camp in the Ruby Lake Campground, we went down to the lake and found some spots where we could see the bird life, and it really was impressive. One thing we saw when we were there was a pronghorn antelope. For those who don't know, this is the fastest land mammal in the Western Hemisphere. It can run up to 55 miles per hour, which is probably around 85 kilometers per hour. And it can do that for up to half a mile before it has to slow down. Even though this animal is called an antelope because it looks like one, it's not actually an antelope. Its closest living relatives are actually the giraffe and the okapi. So it's a pretty unique animal in North America and very beautiful. At Ruby Lake Campground, there were mostly fishermen who were camped there while they were going fishing in the marsh in Ruby Lake. And last time I was there in 2018, it was mostly hunters who were there in the fall to go elk hunting. All right, so that evening we enjoyed ourselves hanging out in the campground and sat down and talked about our evening and thinking about our upcoming first day on the trail. All right, so we drove 8 hours to get to Elko, and then we drove another, hour and a quarter to get out here to the Ruby Valley. And did you guys have any idea what you were going to see when you got to the Ruby Valley?
No, not really. I knew it was supposed to be a bit of an oasis, but I wasn't expecting to see how expansive, large it was.
Yeah.
All I knew was about when you and your dad went, And
You mean your grandpa?
yeah, my grandpa and my father went. And you guys just talked about how much wildlife was there. And so I just was expecting to see, I don't know, birds.
And then what did we see?
Lots of birds.
And?
Antelope, that was cool.
Yeah.
And a scorpion.
And I think I saw a jackrabbit as well. No, I think it delivered on the wildlife front. There's a ton of birds out there.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
And the lake is a lot, the reeds are a lot greener than when I was here with your grandfather 3 years ago in October when it was more dry.
What was the white birds that we saw out there?
Oh, we saw a white pelican.
Pelicans.
Yeah. Definitely interesting to see like shore ocean birds out here in the middle of Nevada or eastern Nevada. Very cool spot. Glad you guys got a chance to see it, and that was one of the reasons I wanted to go to this campground before our hike tomorrow. And speaking of which, so what do you guys have as far as expectations for our first day on the Ruby Crest Trail tomorrow?
I'm expecting a lot of uphill since it seems like we're starting at like a pretty low point in the mountain range. I'm hoping that we get above the smoke line. It's pretty smoky from some big fires in the Sierra Nevada mountains.
Yep.
And it would be nice to get some nice views, but on the way in it was really hard to see anything. So I'm hoping to be able to see past the smoke.
Any thoughts, Tony, on what it's going to be like tomorrow?
Well, lots of uphill at 2,000 feet of elevation gain. I haven't done a trip since 2019 in Nepal, and I just sit around being veal and watching TV and playing computer games, so this will be really entertaining.
It's funny you say that, because a lot of times you say that, well, I haven't done any training and I'm not really ready for this, but you do just fine when you get on the trail. I don't know how many years you're going to get away with that, but you seem to be fine, so I think you're going to be okay tomorrow.
It's just simply motivated by fear of being left to die. It's pretty powerful, actually. But the other thing I'll be curious about, or I feel more comfortable about, is when we see the size of the springs that are indicated here, so we have a sense of, are we carrying enough water or too little water?
Yeah, and it's interesting because we're starting, even though it's a pass in the mountains, it's still sagebrush desert where we're starting the hike. So it does feel like there's not going to be much water. On the map, it says there are some springs, and we're going to carry enough water that we can hopefully get away without needing the springs, but I think the springs will be helpful if they are there, because then we can drink adequate water.
So I think we're starting out anywhere from 1.5 liters to 2 liters is kind of what we're starting out. We'll camel up at the beginning.
Yeah, and we've got like 10 miles tomorrow to go to get to our destination, which is the South Fork of Smith Creek. And we're supposed to have good camping and obviously a creek for a water source. So we will see how it goes.
Mm-hmm. Good thing I checked my life insurance.
Okay, so let's talk about day one of this hike. Harrison Pass is a dirt road that climbs over the range near the southern end. And there's open parking at the pass. But the official trail actually starts 2 miles in up a much narrower and bumpier dirt road. We had my Subaru, which has all-wheel drive and some clearance, but not a huge amount of clearance. So we drove up the dirt road to see if we could cut off some of the distance before the actual trailhead. And after about half a mile, we encountered some terrain that was pretty difficult, and so we found a spot to park. And I thought that was a good compromise because it did cut off a little distance, but it also allowed us to park the car where it would be out of sight from the main road. So depending on where you park, you might have an additional 2 miles added to the trip compared to what the trail actually is. So because of this, we started our hike on that dirt Jeep track. By the way, a true 4x4 vehicle like a Jeep or a high clearance truck would have no problem. It was really just because the Subaru is, an all-wheel drive car and doesn't have that much clearance, even though it has very good clearance for a small SUV. So in any event, we hiked that first part of the dirt road, and once we passed the second parking lot, where the actual trail sign is, that's about 2 miles in, then the track started thinning out until it eventually became a single track hike. One of the things that surprised me is that there are a ton of aspen groves along this trail. If I had done the hike back in 2018 in October, I'm sure the fall colors would have been astounding. They were pretty astounding in the areas I did some day hikes in that year. But this trail is filled to the brim with aspen trees whenever there's a grove of trees. So it really has a pretty neat effect when you're hiking. For anyone who's ever hiked through aspens, the way they shimmer and have a very soothing sound to them. The first day also had 2 separate passes that we climbed. Not terribly high, but passes nonetheless. And we went about 10 miles total, or roughly 16 or 17 kilometers. We ended up camping at the South Fork of Smith Creek, but there was one possible stopping point before that. There's a creek called McCutcheon Creek, which has a pretty decent campsite. It's an exposed campsite, so you wouldn't want to camp there if the weather looks questionable. But the next day of the hike is a fairly short day, as I'll explain. So there's really no need to push it. So if you wanted to stop at McCutcheon Creek, for example, if you got a late start that morning and didn't have enough daylight to go the full distance to Smith Creek, McCutcheon Creek would be a good place to stop. We ended up stopping there for lunch. So we are having lunch at McCutcheon Creek. We're about 2/3 of the way into our first day. How you guys feeling about this so far?
Yeah, kill me now.
Justin is trying to do the trail twice today.
Yeah, leaving my phone at the break spot before the pass was not my brightest idea, so I had to run back and get it.
And then dropping your sandals on the trail. Luckily you had Tony to pick them up for you.
Yeah, luckily the old guys were behind me, looking after my stuff.
It's good to be old and slow, I guess. I feel it in my knees. I don't know. I still don't think I'm going to work out and exercise. I like the suffering. I feel closer to God, especially when I start seeing, delusions, mirages.
But it's been a pretty interesting hike so far. Some cool desert views, and then going through lots of aspen groves and lots of sagebrush.
Very green, much more lush than I would ever imagine.
Yeah, it is
flowers,
green.
Wildflowers.
Yeah, a lot of wildflowers. When Justin ran back to go find his phone that he had left on a rock, he came across a rattlesnake, and he says the fattest marmot he's ever seen. Tell us about that.
Yeah, I almost stepped on the rattlesnake, and then it yelled at me with its tail, and so I kept running. It was a little yellower than the ones I've seen on the West Coast. That was interesting. And then the marmot was like a little bear. It was huge. It looked like it ate a marmot. It was probably 40 pounds.
And then when Tony went back to help you, I thought he might not come back. I thought the marmot might eat him. But he survived, so.
Just be hungry in a half an hour.
Yeah. And it looks like we've got a significant uphill to go. We're at McCutcheon Creek right now. We've got a significant uphill to go, and then a drop into Smith Creek, South Fork of Smith Creek, where we're planning to camp tonight. Might have weather coming in. We've had some cloud cover, and it seems to be building. And Justin claims he felt a couple of drops of rain already, so we'll see what happens.
Those are just my tears falling on his shoulder.
Yeah. So in episode 7, Ryan mentioned that he and his wife camped at the middle fork of Smith Creek, and that they thought that was actually a much tougher place to camp with not very much flat ground, and that he recommended people camp at the South Fork of Smith Creek. So that's what we did. We camped at the South Fork. And at the South Fork, there's plenty of camping. There are plenty of good sites in the aspen groves there, and they have good shelter, they have good flat spaces, they're well used, and they make very good campsites. The creek itself is a very small creek, but still, nonetheless, there's plenty of water for keeping yourself hydrated and for cleaning up. But it's not a creek you can swim in or anything like that. It's much smaller than that. Again, because your next day is a short one, there's no need to push on to the middle fork of Smith Creek like Ryan did. I think when he did it, he didn't know that the campsites at the middle fork weren't as good. And I think what he was also looking for may have been a little bit of solitude. At the South Fork, you're definitely likely to see more people. When we were there were 2 other groups already there when we arrived, We didn't know it at the time, but those ended up being really the only two other groups hiking the trail in the same direction and at the same pace as us. So we saw them over the next several days as well. As soon as we got set up in the mid-afternoon, a storm rolled in, and we ended up hunkering down in the tent while the storm came through.
13, 23, double downwinds.
Nice. What did I even get? Let's see. I got a 14. That was awesome. I still won.
Pure skill.
We are sitting here in the tent, playing Jack. Yeah. Let me start that again. What's that sound? More rain?
Wind?
Wind? Oh, it could be wind. So we are camped at the South Fork of Smith Creek. When we got here, it was hot, and we cleaned up. We were dusty and hot. We cleaned up in the creek, and now we're camped in an aspen grove, and it's windy, so you can probably hear the aspen trees blowing, and it's raining, and there has been thunder and lightning. Yet it's still pretty warm.
Yeah. It's been humid today, and
Yeah.
we're confined in a tent that doesn't have any airflow because of the rain shelter, so it's a little hot in here.
Yeah. So we're out in the Nevada desert in a thunderstorm. And Tony is trying to get a tarp set up over his bivvy.
I want to die.
By the time it's set up, the rain's gonna go.
Probably. That would be my luck.
We can. Oh, it must be wind. It must be the aspens.
Yeah, the quaking aspens.
Yeah. The aspen was. I think Sony showed the video where he's like a fake naturalist. He goes around, he's like, you can tell this is an aspen because of the way it is.
And now it is really coming down. For the moment, the thunder stopped, but it is raining hard.
Holy crap.
We're drying our tent. In our Z-Pax duplex.
Our space vehicle.
Yeah. And Tony's out there with a tarp that covers the top half of his bivvy only.
But we're not comparing.
I'm sure he's doing just fine. How's it going out there, Tony?
Well, underneath the top, it's good. Just in time.
Day 2 is a short day, but it's not an easy day. It's only about 6 miles from the South Fork of Smith Creek to Overland Lake. It could be a bit more if you want to go past Overland Lake to the last water source before the big dry stretch of the trail. So you could make it 7.5 miles. So we're talking 10, 11, maybe 12 kilometers max. But it's uphill most of the way, and there's a big pass to climb, and it's definitely best hiked in the morning to avoid the heat. So we did that. We started out in the morning and climbed the pass. And when we got to the top, there was a surprise waiting for us. So we just climbed. How far do you think we climbed?
About like 2,500.
So at least 2 or 4,000.
That was a serious climb. And so we climb all the way up this pass.
Just to give it up.
It's a brutal climb. And we get to the top, and what do we find?
Roadkill?
Yeah, buck with its intestines out, and a mile before that, some mountain lion scat.
So we've got a mountain lion very close by. There's a buck that's half buried.
So the little pellets, though, that you think that's the buck type poop or whatever?
Yeah, the little
Yeah.
pellets are either the buck or mountain goat.
Right, but you're talking about it was kind of a black string.
Yes,
yeah.
I saw
It
that.
looked pretty fresh too.
Yeah, so we came across a pretty good sizable mountain lion scat in the middle of the trail. And then we get to the pass where we are now, and there's a full mountain lion kill, half buried, a full buck with its ribs hanging out.
And Justin and I are thinking of letting Tony take a nap here and then scurrying away.
Yeah. You're actually recording my last will and testament.
We're not sure if the mountain lion is literally like 10 feet behind us in the rocks or if it's found a better spot to hide out during the day, but its dinner is right behind us.
I just have to run faster than either of you.
That's true, yeah. That was a heck of a climb, though.
Mm-hmm.
That was impressive, man.
I was counting the switchbacks on the way up because it's like it's way too far up there to try and like have the target fixation be the pass.
Yeah.
I made it simple. Hey, there's a flower right at my feet.
Oh, look, there's another one. Oh, look, there's another one.
Look up a little bit. Oh, Jeremy's in front. Fuck him. Off to the right hand side. Oh, there's some mountains and valley down below. That's pretty. I just keep breathing.
Yeah, and then we still had a pretty sizable distance to go when I looked up and saw a silhouette of Justin at the pass already.
I will say what's annoying though about the trail, not the switchbacks here, but leading up to it, it's so the aspen, everything's so thick.
It's just bushwhacking.
It's like, why even have my poles? I was just carrying them in my hands because
they help
hindrance.
You can use them a little bit for bushwhacking.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's true though. The trail's like, I don't know, 8 inches wide or something. All the bushes hanging over.
Well, think about the reason though. Not that many people do this route.
So what you're telling me is we're following you because no one is smart enough to go.
Okay, we saw people in camp last night, but how many people have we seen in 2 days of hiking on the trail?
They may have died. Or UFO abductions, okay? I'm just telling you. Maybe.
So how many people have we seen?
Zero.
Zero.
Other than the campers.
Actually, both days, zero on the trail.
So we've seen 0 people on the trail. The only thing we've seen on the trail is a dead buck killed by a mountain lion.
And we saw a rattlesnake this morning.
Oh yeah, we did see a rattlesnake this morning.
Pretty healthy looking one.
Yeah, it was pretty healthy
Fat
looking.
marmot. But no marmot.
Yeah, so today we've seen a dead buck, mountain lion poop, and a rattlesnake. That's about par for the course for the mountains in Nevada.
But we have a nice breeze, and I will say it is overcast. So we're not getting beat to death by the sun, so that was a plus.
Yeah, it's pleasant right now. And it looks like we've got a little bit of like trudging a little bit uphill along the side of this mountain before it drops down, and we're supposed to get to Overland Lake in a little while, and that's our destination for the day.
It is hell of a view, but it would be nicer if it wasn't as smoky. I'll take it.
It got
I can
smoky
imagine.
today.
Yeah, yesterday there wasn't that much smoke, and we had thunder showers last night, and I don't know if it started new fires in some of these mountains or not from all the lightning, but there's more smoke today.
It's also windier, which could mean it's just traveling better.
Yeah, it could be.
I mean, we're at the top of the pass, so maybe that's why it's windy.
It's probably always windy up here.
Yeah.
All right, so onward from here downhill to Overland Lake.
Hard part's done, right?
Yep.
Yep.
What we thought was the top of the pass was actually a false summit. And we had to make sort of a left turn and go higher to the true pass overlooking Overland Lake. Overland Lake is a pretty circular lake in a hanging valley, very pretty spot. Interestingly, there were cows there. The ranchers bring the cows up in the summer to higher ground where there's more grass. There's actually a little shed at one end of the lake where it looks like the cowboys, the folks that accompany the cows up to the pasture, probably stay in, or at least keep their equipment in. And there were some other people there. There were one of the groups that we had seen the day before, but also some people who hiked in from a separate trail just to come to Overland Lake and weren't hiking the entire trail. If you want some solitude and don't want to camp at Overland Lake, there are 2 water sources past it, and they could give you a head start on the 3rd day, which is a big day without any water for a long stretch. One group of women that we met had actually camped a little bit past Overland Lake. Apparently, at a spot where there's a waterfall coming down, if you hike up, you can get to a flat area where it looks like is a well-used camping area, maybe a Boy Scout camping area, they thought. But the women we ran into said they had camped in that spot, so they were able to have definitely more solitude, has a nice view. But Overland Lake is a nice place to be as well, so you have to decide whether you want to be at a lake or want to be a little bit closer for the big 3rd day. once we had gotten cleaned up and had lunch at Overland Lake, another storm rolled in. And once again, we got set up just in time. This storm came a little earlier than the day before, but we had had a shorter day of hiking and were already set up in camp. As soon as the storm rolled in, Tony and Justin both fell asleep, and I listened to the rain and the thunder. After the rain, we had a relaxing evening overlooking the lake and talked about our day and about the coming day. So we made it into camp today at like 1. Was it 1 o'clock maybe?
Yeah, about 1.
Because we had lunch.
No, it was about 12:30, I think, because we had lunch first before going to camp.
I think we had, okay.
The rain hit at like 1:15.
Yeah, so we get into camp, and by 1:15, 1:30, it's pouring thunder, and we just got set up in time, right?
I was just in time. I dove underneath my tarp and bivvy and did some video of watching the raindrops just sheet off of and come down.
And and this one wasn't on the forecast either. Yesterday it was.
Yeah, and it's still cloudy right now. It's almost getting to be dark, and it's cloudy. Doesn't look great. And tomorrow we've got to hike on a ridge above tree line the entire day.
Perfect opportunity for lightning.
Yeah, so I'm hoping tonight it clears up, or at least it doesn't get worse.
Yeah. But it was a heck of a hike today.
Even though it was a short
It was only like 6 miles, but the pass was brutal.
I passed out for a couple hours snoring.
Yeah, so we get into camp, we set up our tent and tarp, and it starts pouring. And next thing you know, I'm reading my book on my Kindle app on my phone, and there's 2 people snoring.
The fact that you can hear me and I'm like good 15, 20 feet away, that's impressive.
No, you were definitely snoring. And then Justin was breathing hard, sleeping for sure.
Yeah.
Having dreams about my doggy.
Yeah, he had a bingo. Wait, tell us here. Let's hear about the dream you had about your dog.
It was a Zoom playdate for dogs, and my dog was just like, I don't think I fully thought out the semantics of it, but we were like watching some other dogs and then filming my dog, and he's just giving me the I want to go for a walk eyes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so this is how COVID has affected the youth of America. Now, when they even when they dream about their dog, they dream about a Zoom playdate.
Mm-hmm.
Video.
And then we found a viewpoint of what we're going to be hiking tomorrow.
We did, and it looked a little intimidating.
Yeah, it doesn't look super gentle.
So I guess, have we determined that where we're camped at is basically drainage for winter?
Where we are right now, where our tent is? Yeah, but we got rained on pretty hard, and it did fine.
Yeah, it did fine.
Because the ground's really dry, so it absorbed the water really quickly.
Sponged it up.
But I think you're right. It's probably a pond in the spring, and then it's probably
an outlet.
Frozen.
Yeah. But behind us, down behind where we're camping, off to the left, There's some nice little viewing areas. You can see the valley, or you can see Utah in the distance.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
that
a
was
huge
cool.
view.
Huge
yeah,
view.
yeah, just into the end of Nevada and into Utah.
Yeah.
It's beautiful.
If it wasn't as smoky, it would have been amazing to see the shadows of the clouds on the ground. That would have been
Well, right now, east, it didn't look too bad. I mean, it was after the storm today, that view east looked pretty clear.
Yeah, definitely more clear than this morning. It was brutally hazy this morning.
Yeah, that was one of the things that was tough this morning is when we were coming up to the pass, it was really smoky to the west of where we were.
I didn't really notice. I just looked at my feet, shuffled, and going, Lord, why? God, why? Why is this recreation?
Yeah.
I would only occasionally look up, because then the sweat would, fall into my eyes.
And so today we had a hard day, and it was only a half day really, and we had planned that so we had time today to relax, even though it ended up being naps during a storm. And it was 6 miles, even though it was a pretty hard uphill day. But tomorrow we've got to go potentially, if we go to the lake where we were thinking about going, it's about 15 miles.
Right.
So that's going to be a pretty long day.
To be fair about today, it was over 2,000 feet of elevation gain in a relatively short amount of distance, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Up. And and then we also had a chance to jump into the lake, clean up, wash off.
Yep.
It was actually a really nice day, despite everything else hard. We earned it, I guess you want to say.
Yeah.
Take the nap, bathe.
And we kind of beat the rain, kind of like yesterday, where we got set up in time before the rain came. So
Just barely.
Just barely. So we were able to get in the tent right as it started raining and thunder started, and we just gave us an excuse to relax for a couple hours.
Mm-hmm. That's saying something. I normally have the Chihuahua gene. I just can't sit still, man.
Yeah. You sat still very quickly.
I was dead. It's more than still. I was dead.
All right, so we'll see what happens tonight, and then tomorrow a big day, right?
Yeah, early start and get to it, man.
Tomorrow's the biggest.
No water the entire day, pretty much.
Yeah.
So we have to load up here, take as much water as we can carry, basically, and
Hike quickly.
hike quickly.
We decided 3 liters is the way to go.
Minimum, yeah.
We'll have to cycle our liquids.
I'm hoping we don't have to do that.
Yeah, it's a level of desperation I don't want to get to quite yet.
Day 3 is the big day. Day 3 is waterless for most of it. There's a little bit of water for a mile or so, a few streams after Overland Lake. But beyond that, there's no water for probably 12 miles or close to 20 kilometers. There are several summits and passes, and it's a beautiful ridgeline and a really long day of a lot of hiking. There are views in both directions at certain spots, all the way to the west into the desert and all the way to the east into the desert toward Utah. During the middle of that long day, we stopped for lunch at the top of one peak and talked about what we had seen.
Because the lake's not on the map for mine. The first thing on the map is the last water source, so it's hard to tell.
So we are at what we are calling Lunch Peak because we're having lunch, and it's probably about halfway through our day on the Ruby Crest, day 3 of our Ruby Crest Trail hike. And I don't even know where to start. The views here are astounding in every direction.
It's a good place to start.
Yeah, I think you earn every view. There's a lot of elevation gain and loss, and each pass is just something more magnificent and bigger and bolder.
You have canyon after canyon going to the west that are huge, glacially carved, sort of U-shaped canyons. And then you've got a crest that drops off to the east with some more open canyons. You can see all the way into the next mountain ranges into probably Utah. And then to the south and to the north, you've got the Ruby Mountains, which are just magnificent. And we've been walking over the top of them. And you can follow the trail along the crest. We're at over 10,000 feet.
Dotted with very stubby looking pines that are wind blown.
Yeah, we're not it's interesting. It feels like we're above tree line, but we're not totally above tree line. There's a little bit of a sort of flagged or crumb-holed smaller pines up here.
Some areas that are kind of rolling hillish, a meandering trail,
Yeah.
piles of rocks.
The trail, I would say, what would you say, Justin? I would say the trail is fair.
In terms of what?
Like, they're not killing us on the grade.
No, the grade's nice.
Grade's nice. I find it more cardio work. I'm just
It's
punching
intense.
for air. That's It's not my legs are giving out. It's just my lungs.
And we're going, like, we're at the top of the crest, but, like, we go down after every peak or pass. And so even though we're staying, like, above 10,000, we're going from, like, 10 to 10.2, back to 9.9, back to 10.5. And
Yeah,
gotta
definitely.
go over the biggest one.
There's some give and take. There's some give and take. For
We've
sure.
got Wines Peak coming up, which is the high point in the whole mountain range.
And today we've seen more people on the trail than we have the whole trip.
Well, the last 2 days we didn't see anybody. We saw people in camp, and it's the same people. It's all the same people who are doing, not that many overall, maybe 10 people total.
Yeah.
There's a group of 4 coming up on us right now who we saw the last couple days camped. After lunch, we had one more big challenge, which was the peak closest to Wines Peak. Wines Peak is the biggest peak that's along the trail and accessible from the trail. And so it's worth detouring off the trail to get to the top of the peak. It's really a almost completely horizontal jaunt because you're already at the very top, close to the peak. There are taller peaks in the range, but not where they're accessible from the trail. So definitely take a detour to Wines Peak when you get there. Camping options at the end of day 3 are varied. You could stop at North Furlong Lake, which saves you having to cross over one more incline at the end of the day, which just about put an end to Tony after being very tired from the Ridgeline hike and having to go back uphill at the end of the day. So you could avoid that by going to North Furlong Lake. There's supposedly a spring, and we saw a campsite just before that incline, but I didn't see the spring or the water, so I'm not sure if that's year-round or not. Once you cross over that last hill and start heading back downhill into the next valley, there are other options, which are Favre Lake, Castle Lake, or Liberty Lake. We stopped at Favre Lake and spent the night there. There are lots of camping options there. There are also likely to be lots of other people there because it's not too far from the Lamoille Canyon end of the trail, and there are lots of good campsites. Not that far above Favre Lake, though, is Castle Lake, and one of the groups we had talked to planned to camp there for the evening. We didn't go up there, so I'm not sure how good the campsites are, but you might have more privacy there if you decide to camp at Castle Lake. And then the other option is Liberty Lake, which is, it's uphill on the other side of the valley from Favre Lake, but it's also closer to your exit trailhead, so that probably takes a little bit of time off of your next day. And there were some campsites there, but they weren't great. So I'm sure you could find something, but Favre Lake really had the best options for camping. So I'm not sure exactly how far Favre Lake was from where we started at Overland Lake. There were signs that put it at anywhere from 15 to 18 miles. And the hiking was very tough terrain, a lot of up and down. And so it's certainly a big day, no matter how you do it. At the end of the day, after we had set up camp at Favre Lake, we talked about our day. So how'd it go today?
Want to answer that before I do?
Sure. It was a really tough day, but pretty much spectacular views from the first step to the last step. It was beautiful. We'd followed the ridgeline for the majority of the hike today, which I thought would mean like, oh, you're at the top and you're just like kind of flattish ground as you're like walking around along the top, but there was a lot of up and down still, just going from peak to peak. But it was beautiful. It was really, really gorgeous.
What do you think, Tony?
I almost found God.
Almost? Just
Almost. No, it was a very hard day, incredibly gratifying, beautiful views again, a lot of up and down. For me, because I'm out of shape and I don't prepare because I'm an idiot. I was really reduced to at some points counting steps, going 1, 2, 3, then using the poles together, and that's how I was marching up the hill. Tough. I think a lot of cardio for me, just a lot of gasping around, sweating.
Just putting one foot in front of the other.
Just exactly it. Just one. And I appreciate that. It's being tested. Near the end of the day, we had a little bit of a rise to go through. We had kind of thunder. Honestly, I had to muster quite a lot of willpower to just keep going. I was spent. I admit it. I could have almost like laid down and started sucking my thumb, curled up in a ball, but that probably wouldn't look too good.
Yeah, it was one of the harder days I've had in a long time backpacking. It was a ton of work, and we had about a 12-mile stretch with no water, which we knew about, so we prepared for it, and we brought plenty of water, but it puts a kind of urgency to what you're doing, where you've got sort of limited supply of water, and that you have to get through that stretch.
Right. I think if you're right, and we carried anywhere from 3 to maybe 3.25 liters, I'm guessing.
Yeah, it was around 3 liters each.
It gives you an urgency or a thoughtful, a purpose in moving.
Yeah.
I think that I would say we started at 6:45.
Yeah, we started around 6:45 in the morning, finished around 3:45 in the afternoon.
And we weren't screwing around.
And we weren't without many breaks. So it was pretty much 9 hours straight of intense up and down at high elevation hiking.
Yeah. Just today we went over, I don't know how you want to classify them, but like 3 passes and like peaked to 3 different peaks.
Yeah.
Like we were going to the top of a lot of
the trail stuff. It was just sort of the geography of it, where there were these sort of granite walls coming off of the side. Mm-hmm. So sometimes just to go past that, the trail would actually go over a summit of a peak. And so there were passes, but there were also peaks. And so there were some serious, I was thinking about that. There are some days where you do 1 or 2 of those and you feel like that's a big day. We probably did the equivalent of 5 or 6 of those today.
That's the big part. But I will say the reward for that is when you get that next view.
Yeah,
it's pretty amazing. You're just seeing ranges of, the mountain range there. Some of it more gentle and rolling and brown, others more jagged and green. So a lot of variety with the suffering.
Yeah.
And more on the views, we could see like out into the salt flats that were bordering Nevada and Utah. We could see like other mountain ranges, but the peaks in the Ruby Crest are just incredible in both directions, north and south. They were just beautiful, and the canyons in between them were crazy too.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, in every direction, the views were impressive, and you could see in every direction.
Yeah. And it's varied too, just with the canyons. It's not just like some places, here's the one mountain range, right? You would just have all these other things that are below it, I guess canyons or otherwise. So there's nothing boring about it.
No, it was impressive. Yeah.
It's impressive.
And now we are sitting here at Favre Lake. We've only got about 5 miles to go in the morning to get out to our shuttle. It's going to take us back to our car.
One more pass.
One more, yeah. Well, we learned tonight, it's one of those things where we never really look at the map until we have to. And so after finishing this brutal day today, Justin looked at the map and found that we actually have to go up 1,000 feet and over a pass in the morning, first thing, before we then drop down the last several miles to get out. But you know what? It won't feel that bad. It'll be early. It'll be a one thing, and then we know we're done with it. But so we're not quite done with the hike. But we're at a nice spot by a lake. There are a large group of probably maybe Boy Scouts,
family stuff.
Yeah.
Here, so that's been kind of
it's
different than what we've had the last few nights.
Yeah, we can tell we're a little closer to civilization.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's just because of the proximity being 5 miles from the trailhead. It's more accessible.
Yeah,
so it's not like our experiences the last couple of nights of more solitude, really.
Yeah, today was the busiest day on the trail, and we saw 3 groups of people, 4 maybe.
Yeah.
Like there weren't many people on the trail, and camped out at Favre Lake tonight. There's probably 20 tents.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But you know what? I don't worry about that. Like, it's a different experience, but that's fine too.
Yeah.
You know?
Mm-hmm. it is what it is, and you just adapt and go with it.
And I've just been enjoying the view since we've been here. We've got a campsite that's in a pretty good spot where we can see the lake. It's a pretty lake.
We had a little bit of rain coming in, a little sprinkles. We had to put the rain jackets on.
I mean, we've had rain every day out here, which was that was a big surprise to me.
Yes. Opportunity to use the rain gear. I've not, and tarp, which I really haven't pulled out in quite a while.
Yeah. Although right now, as it's getting into evening, it's probably 7:30ish at night, and it's starting to clear up, it looks like.
And we do have some sun.
Yeah.
Yeah, a little bit. It looks like the sunset down the valley is actually probably pretty nice. We don't have a good view of it right now, but it looks nice.
On day 4, you're really just trying to get out to the trailhead. And it's probably anywhere from 5 to 7 miles left. I'm not sure exactly. You have to go up Liberty Pass from Favre Lake if you're camped at Favre Lake. And so there is an uphill at the beginning of the day. But once you get to Liberty Pass, you have a view into Lamoille Canyon that's beautiful. And there is Lamoille Lake that will come into view as you descend, and then 2 smaller lakes called the Dollar Lakes. Lamoille Canyon is a beautiful U-shaped canyon, and so you have a pretty enjoyable view all the way down to the trailhead. After a couple miles, you start to come across day hikers that are coming up from Lamoille Canyon. At the end of the trail, there's a parking lot and a bathroom. There are no other services. We had a shuttle planned for 11 o'clock in the morning with Cowboy John shuttles. Unfortunately, Cowboy John himself is now deceased, but his widow Janice is still running the business and shuttling hikers between the 2 ends of the Ruby Crest Trail. And she arrived exactly on time at 11 in the morning, which was perfect. So when Janice arrived, she shuttled us back the hour or so drive to Harrison Pass to pick up our car. One thing to keep in mind is if you use Cowboy John shuttles and Janice is your ride, she does not have 4-wheel drive. So as I mentioned at the beginning, depending on where you park, you may be further up that initial road. We were only a half a mile up, and Tony and I, having seniority in age over Justin, sent him to go get the car. It was nice to have my son there who was old enough to drive, but young enough to be enthusiastic to go pick up the Subaru that was parked a half a mile in. After the hike, we drove back to Elko, and for a post-hike lunch, I recommend the OG Deli, which is a Basque deli. There's quite a presence of Basque culture out in this area. The Basques originally came to Nevada for gold during the gold rush in the 19th century. But in the 1870s, there were large Basque ranching operations that moved to Elko County, and they were mostly sheep herding. Interestingly, they were not experienced sheep herders from the Basque country, though they may have been experienced with animal husbandry, but not with shepherding, apparently. And so this was something they had to learn to do when they arrived in America. Many of them moved there to escape political turmoil back home. Today, as I said, there's quite a presence of Basque culture, and there's a Basque festival every 4th of July weekend in Elko. So I recommend the OG Deli because it's a little taste of something unique, and it has a ton of different sandwich options that pretty much can satisfy anyone. So that's it. That was our hike of the Ruby Crest Trail in 2021. I hope that hearing this perspective on the Ruby Crest Trail has given you something more than just what we heard from Ryan, Cornia, and my father talking about the area and their experience there. Though, of course, I think Ryan did a great job in his website. As I mentioned in episode 7, is certainly worth checking out. He has a really good post on the Ruby Crest Trail that gives a lot of detail on the hike. And the information he provided was incredibly useful to me. I went back and listened to episode 7 and took notes before I prepared for this hike. And so I hope that I have once again inspired you to hike the Ruby Crest Trail. And I hope you enjoyed this update episode. It's something I plan to do from time to time. I don't know how often I'll be able to hike a trail that I covered on the show but hadn't hiked before. but I thought that it would give you a different perspective if I covered a trail again from my perspective. If you enjoyed this episode or any episode of the podcast, please tell a friend about us. And keep in mind that this podcast is entertainment and meant to spark your interest. If you decide to hike the trail, do your own research. Like anything else worth doing, outdoor adventure has risk. So when you go, pack your common sense. And when you get back, tell me how it went. Before I go, I'll mention, as I always do, that Trails Worth Hiking listeners can get a 10% discount on backpacking meals at outdoorherbivore.com. Outdoor Herbivore makes delicious vegan and vegetarian backpacking meals, though, as you know, because I always say it, you don't have to be a vegan or vegetarian to enjoy the meals. They're just great backpacking meals, period. They have a lot of calories, more than most other backpacking meals, which is great when you're on the trail and really hungry from a long day of hiking. And they boil in a bag, so they're easy to prepare. They're fairly compact, which is great, so that you can pack them easily. A lot of backpacking meals tend to be in really odd-shaped, large packaging. The Outdoor Herbivore meals are packed in a way that make them really easy to put in your pack for the trail. And so, yeah, give them a try. I like the blackened quinoa. I like the chickpea sesame ziti. And there are a couple of good burrito options. There are lots of good choices. Go to the website, outdoorherbivore.com. Use the discount code TWH10P, Trails Worth Hiking 10%, to get 10% off on your order of Outdoor Herbivore backpacking meals at outdoorherbivore.com. All right, let's talk about our next show. Next time on Trails Worth Hiking, we go to the Great Lakes. No, not those Great Lakes. These Great Lakes sit at more than 10,000 feet up in the Himalayas. But this time, it's not the Himalayas of Nepal like in episodes 14 and 15. These are an even more mysterious part of the Himalayas and have a distinct beauty nothing like the deep river gorges and treacherous passes of Nepal. In this part of the Himalayas, there are beautiful grass-covered green valleys and sky-blue lakes, all surrounded by impressive peaks, including a view of one of the tallest peaks on Earth. Next time on Trails Worth Hiking, we go to Kashmir, a land whose ownership has long been disputed, but is today part of India. And we follow the path of the Kashmir Great Lakes Trek. If you have any questions or feedback on this episode, or ideas for future episodes, including if you want to be a guest and talk about a trail that you've hiked, reach out to me at trailsworthhiking@gmail.com. So start planning your next hike, and before you know it, you'll be on the trail. Thanks for listening.
We're near the end of the day. Anywhere from, could be 15 to maybe 18 miles. All dry. Started out with about little less than 3.5 liters. I have 1 liter left. Number of passes, very beautiful. High mountains. On a number of passes, you're just 1 foot in front of the other, and one particular one, I had to count numbers like 1, 2, 3, and then plant booth poles, and just keep going up and up. Right now I'm doing the wobble, and to be honest, I'm pretty exhausted. I'm kind of on fumes. I'm kind of robot here, stumbling my way, or as Jeremy calls it, and I call it too, the wobble. There was a little uphill that we had before this descent, and really it took almost everything to go up that. My legs are tight, but they're not sore and giving out. I'm just, to be honest, it's fatigue. I'm tired. Oddly, I enjoy this part. It's about pushing yourself On the first day, I was saying, the sun is the forge, the trail's the anvil, my feet are the hammers, and I am the piece of iron that is getting the impurities worked out of it